grabo.
A todos.
Listo, a todos, a todos. Aquí pon bastante flash.
Hello, my name is Ramey, and I did my practice experience in Ecuador. While in Ecuador, I rotated between two cities. The first city that I was in was called Guayaquil, and Guayaquil is Ecuador's most populated city, and it's also Ecuador's main port. The other city that I was in was called Puyo, and that's more on the eastern side of Ecuador, and it's a little bit more rural, but it was still really nice. In Guayaquil, I rotated with a vector control program, a public primary health clinic, a non-governmental organization that provided primary health care services, and I rotated with the community dietitian. In the vector control program, we separated into groups and did house visits. So we would go to people's houses, knock on their doors, and if they would let us in, we would educate them on the signs and symptoms of the vector-borne diseases. We would check all the area for open standing water. So if it was open standing water in use, we would treat it with larvicide. If it was not in use, we would check to see if there was any mosquito larvae. We would collect that larvae, and then we would dump out the water. The diseases or the viruses we were, most concerned with were chikungunya, dengue, and Zika. And these viruses are spread by the Aedes aegypti mosquito. So when we would collect the larva, we would take it back to the headquarters, and we would monitor them, and when they would hatch, we would check to see what type of mosquito it was. And if it was the Aedes aegypti, we would take measures to make sure and control the spread of any of those viruses. In the primary health clinic, since there was such a high rate of pregnancy, there was always an OBGYN there. So I mostly was with the OBGYNs, and when I was with them, we would go on these house visits to go visit the girls who were not being compliant with their prenatal care. So we would go to their houses, and in the houses, we would take their vital signs. We would listen to the baby's heartbeat with this non-electrical contraption, which was basically just like a funnel. And the OBGYNs would put it against the mom's tummies, and they would hear the heartbeat. And I tried, and I couldn't, but it was really, really interesting to see how they would care for these women with such low resources. So it was really awesome, and I really enjoyed that a lot. Ecuador has the third highest adolescent fertility rate in South America. So the adolescent fertility rate per 1,000 women ages 15 through 19 in Ecuador is 76.2. Just to put that in comparison with the U.S., in the U.S. it's 24.1. So the rate in Ecuador is almost triple that of the U.S. And when I was speaking with the community dietitian, she was very concerned and very passionate about breaking the cycle of adolescent pregnancy. And it was very unfortunate. In one of my rotations, I was late because the car that was going to pick me up had to rush a newborn baby to the hospital that they had found in the street, kind of just thrown there. So the community dietitian was very upset when she heard about this, and she kind of said these kids don't know how to be mothers, and so that's the result of it, is not taking care of your kids and continuing to play into that cycle of poverty. In working with the community dietitian, I got to visit a clinic that specializes in women's health. And in that clinic, there were 2 OBGYNs and 1 family doctor to care for about 400 patients. So it was really interesting to see the setup of that clinic and how everything kind of worked. When speaking to the OBGYNs and the doctors, they were all very, very passionate about what they did, and so that was really amazing to see. With the community dietitian, I also got to visit a campaign that was called Cuidando Nuestros Hijos, which is a campaign that is held twice a year. So I was fortunate that it was being held at the time that I was there. and it targets children between the ages of 0 and 3 years old. And during these campaigns, nutrition assessments are taken, the children are checked for iron deficiency anemia, vaccinations are provided, as well as dental care. And it's really big on education. So after all of these measures have been taken, they're able to speak with a doctor, and depending if they're malnourished or not, they would be given vitamin or mineral supplements. So it was really cool to see that as well. What I did notice is that they didn't provide food for these children, and so I know in the US we have the Women, Infants, and Children program, or WIC, where we give food to high-risk mothers, pregnant mothers, lactating mothers, and children. And so in Ecuador, they didn't give out food, and when I asked about why they didn't give out food, the community dietitian kind of said, well, if we give food, they might take advantage, and et cetera, et cetera. So that was one difference that I saw as well in those programs. However, since the 1980s, malnutrition in children 5 years and below in Ecuador has decreased by 18%, from 41% to 23%. So they've been taking a lot of active roles to help stop malnutrition in children under 5 in Ecuador, which is really good. My last rotation in Guayaquil was with a non-governmental organization that provided healthcare services for a $3 charge. And so just to put that into perspective, a full meal in Guayaquil costed on average $2.50. So in the US, if an average meal would cost, let's say, $5 to $7, I guess that's what would translate into the charge here in the US. So during my rotation at the non-governmental organization, I worked, of course, primarily with the OBGYN, and I was able to attend an educational conference put on by a group of OBGYNs for midwives, traditional midwives. And so part of the educational session was on sexual and reproductive rights. And the OBGYNs understand that the community of women, especially in that more poverty-stricken area, maybe didn't trust the doctors so much, and they put much more of their trust in the midwives. So by educating the midwives on the importance on family planning, contraceptive methods, they were hoping to break the cycle of poverty and to save lives. And so they also talked to the midwives on the importance of working in conjunction with the OBGYNs to care for these pregnant mothers. So what I noticed was, as these midwives were talking about different stories of when they were caring for different pregnant women, sometimes the pregnant women would die during childbirth, and the midwives were not taking these girls to the hospital. And so the OBGYNs were really stressing how the mothers need to give birth in a hospital, because if anything comes up, they have the resources there to take care of these pregnant women. And so I thought that was extremely interesting, how they were trying to educate the community or the pregnant women through the midwives. And they were trying to develop this very trusting relationship with the midwives, which I thought was really cool. While in Puyo, our first rotation was with the Quechua tribe in the rainforest. We stayed in the rainforest for 3 days and 2 nights and were able to learn and observe how the Quechuas lived, the foods they ate, and the different male and female roles. The Quechuas lived almost 100% off the land, and they would only go to the city to buy sugar, flour, rice, and cooking oil. We also helped with the harvesting of the yucca, and what I thought was most interesting is that when we would pull the yucca root out from the ground, we would take off the root, and then we would replant the seed so that another yucca crop could grow. That way we were able to sustain all the food for the tribe, and I thought that was really, really interesting on how important sustainability was in the tribe and in Ecuador in general. While in the rainforest, we also learned about natural medicines, in particular medicines used for children and mothers. So for the children, there was different plants that they used to help with colic, and there was even a beetle larva that they would use to help cure the children of asthma. That was really interesting. Also, for the women, there was plants to help increase libido, fertility, increase strength during childbirth, help the mothers to produce milk, and help speed up the birth of the child. There was even a plant that helped with contraception, like almost like a birth control, which was really, really awesome. The next rotation that we did was in a rural town called Pitirishka that was about an hour and a half bus ride away from Puyo. And in this small town, we rotated in what was called a subcentro de salud, which was basically a healthcare clinic that was a little smaller and was able to offer some type of healthcare in those rural areas. It just wasn't as complete as a healthcare clinic would be in a bigger city like in Puyo. In this little clinic, we had 2 family doctors, an OBGYN, a dentist, a nurse, and a community outreach professional. The main things that were seen in this clinic were, of course, pregnancy, respiratory illnesses, skin problems, parasites, and lice. So that was the majority of what we saw. And also, the community outreach professional would do house visits, mainly passing out or distributing vaccines. And it was a little bit painful for me because they were giving out the yellow fever vaccine for free because there had been a yellow fever outbreak. And so they were giving out these vaccines for free when I, in the US, before going to Ecuador, got the yellow fever vaccine for over $200. I know I'm kind of going over in the time, but it's because I honestly witnessed and was able to do so much in Ecuador. But after the rotation in Pitirishka, we rotated in the hospital of Puyo. After I had taken one of our teammates to the emergency room in Puyo. So while we rotated there, I actually saw the doctor that treated my team member, so that was kind of funny. But in the hospital of Puyo, they were renovating the women's center to be more culturally sensitive to the indigenous women giving birth in those hospitals. So that was really interesting. They were also offering different types of foods to better meet the needs of the indigenous population so that they would eat at the hospital instead of finding it difficult to eat anywhere else. In a nutshell, that was my trip to Ecuador. I experienced, like I said, so much. I learned so much. And I really want to thank everybody for their time and listening to my presentation. And thank you so much.